The fateful dinner in San Diego. My name is Madison Carter, and I was 34 the night my illusions shattered. It was a rare, balmy February evening in downtown San Diego, the kind that made the city's twinkling lights feel magical. The occasion? My mom Linda's 62nd birthday. I'd planned the whole thing weeks in advance. Called in reservations at her favorite cozy Italian bistro on Grape Street. Coordinated with the staff to string up gold balloons near the big bay window. Created a special playlist of songs from her youth. Even texted her friends to remind them not to let her pay for a single cocktail. By the time our family arrived, the four of us, plus a handful of my mom's closest friends, the place buzzed with easy laughter. Waiters bustled back and forth, arms laden with wood-fired pizzas and caprese salads dotted with fresh basil. The air was thick with the scent of baked bread and white wine, and my mom was glowing in the kind of way I hadn't seen for years. Cheeks flushed, eyes shining, showing off the earrings I'd gotten her last Christmas. My sister Whitney slid into the booth next to me, snapping selfies and nudging me to smile. My dad, Robert, was quieter than usual, nursing his Cabernet from across the table, but breaking into a rare grin when my mom teased him about his outdated phone. It was perfect, or as close to perfect as things got in my family, given all we'd weathered the last few years. I remember leaning back in my chair, warmth spreading in my chest, as my mom laughed at a joke her old coworker made. I felt, for a fleeting moment, that I'd finally stitched together something whole from the frayed threads of our family. This dinner felt like a reward for every sleepless night spent worrying about everyone, every sacrifice I'd made to keep us functional. We were halfway through a molten chocolate cake when my dad cleared his throat, his glass raised in the air. The room seemed to quiet in anticipation. He looked from my mom to me, then to Whitney, his eyes skipping just past mine. "I have a quick toast," he began, voice clearer and more emotionless than I'd ever heard at a family event. "To family. Whatever happens, we stick together. That's what matters." It sounded good, safe, almost. But when he set the glass down, his demeanor changed. The hand, not holding his fork, curled into a fist under his chin, jaw set hard. Without looking at me, he said, "Madison, your mother and I have decided to take back the house you're living in. It's ours, not yours. You've got 48 hours to pack your things." The world spun. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe he was making a cruel joke, or testing boundaries the way he sometimes had since my parents split a few years back. But Mom's face told me it was all too real. Her lips pressed into a thin line, gaze glued to her plate, shoulders drawn tight. No one else said a word. Even Whitney, who never missed a chance for drama, just stared at her phone, thumbs frozen. I felt my face flush, every eye in the room suddenly turning our way. My hands shook under the table. The knife I'd been holding clattered loudly, attracting curious glances from a nearby couple. I squeezed my napkin, willing myself not to cry and not to scream. I finally managed. "What?" My voice was too sharp, slicing through the awkward silence. Dad just shrugged, as if he'd reminded me to take the trash out. "We'll talk after the cake," he said, cool as ice. Then, almost offhand, "It's nothing personal, just business." The rest of the dinner blurred. Mom excused herself to the restroom and didn't come back for nearly 15 minutes. Whitney barely touched her food. Dad acted like nothing had happened, describing in detail his latest golf game to Mom's friends and laughing at the server's attempt at a joke. I didn't wait for the candles or for the group photo. I slung my purse over my shoulder, heels clicking on the tile floor, and walked out into the thick San Diego night air, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. Was this really happening? After everything I'd poured, money, time, energy, into making that house feel like a home, how could they so easily threaten to pull it all away? The city lights felt cold and distant, while Ubers zipped down the street and tourists snapped photos of the harbor. I stood on the sidewalk, blinking back tears, and realized for the first time that my family might see me as nothing more than an obstacle or a pawn in whatever private game they were playing. That night marked the end of what I thought I knew about family, and the beginning of a fight I never imagined I'd have to face. And as I drove home, every memory of the dinner burned in my brain, a painful reminder that sometimes the biggest betrayals come dressed as ordinary moments, right when you least expect them. Old attic secrets. After that disastrous birthday dinner, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my father's cold voice echoed in my mind. You've got 48 hours to pack your things. The walls of the house, once a source of comfort, suddenly felt like they were closing in. Moonlight spilled through the living room windows, illuminating all the small touches I'd added over the years. Succulent plants on the mantel, curtains I'd spent hours choosing. The gallery of family photos I'd hung on the staircase. Were those memories now meaningless? Was this truly not my home? Restless, I wandered the house until, out of habit more than intent, I found myself at the base of the rickety attic stairs. The attic was a space I rarely visited, a world apart, thick with the scent of old cedar, cardboard, and dust. We'd always treated it as a kind of family archive, a dumping ground for holiday decorations, ancient yearbooks, and keepsakes from decades past. I flicked on the shaky bulb overhead and climbed up, each step creaking beneath my weight. The attic was chilly and dim, with old moving boxes stacked half haphazardly amid out-of-fashion winter coats and baby furniture we'd never gotten around to donating. I brushed cobwebs away and crouched by a pile of boxes labeled in Mom's looping script, Xmas and Easter. Buried beneath them was something different, a metallic lockbox I didn't remember seeing before. My curiosity spiked. I pulled the box out, coughing as a fresh cloud of dust enveloped me. The box was heavy, and the lock had long since rusted open. Inside, the contents were as ordinary as they were surprising. Months-old utility bills, stacks of bank and mortgage statements, scraps of familiar handwriting. But what struck me most was that nearly every official document in that box, bills, letters, forms, listed my name, not my parents'. I sat down hard on an old ottoman, heart pounding, beginning to sift through the papers one by one. Buried near the bottom was a thick, yellowed envelope. Property records, Carter residence. It read, in my late grandmother's hand. My chest tightened as I gingerly opened it. I unfolded the title deed, noting the date, issued over a decade ago, long before I'd ever thought of living here alone. Beneath my grandparents' names was a faint handwritten line. The ink faded, but unmistakable. I sat frozen for what felt like hours. Had this always been true? Was this house truly left to me and not my parents'? If so, why had no one ever told me? Not when I uprooted to move in after my divorce. Not when I spent nearly all my savings fixing the roof or installing the new kitchen. I read the note again and again, the meaning settling in heavy as stone. I searched further, lining up papers on the attic floor, property tax statements paid in my name, old correspondence from the bank, and a stack of legal letters referring to a family trust. There were also utility bills, cable setup paperwork, and insurance documents, nearly all with either my name or my grandparents'. Everything pointed to a reality my parents had never shared. A wave of anger mingled with heartbreak. Was this why Dad was so certain he could order me out? Because he counted on my ignorance? Had both my parents quietly counted on me never noticing the paperwork piling up in my own name while they claimed ownership out loud? At some point, probably around 3 a.m., I snapped a photo of the will and deed with my phone, feeling the urge to preserve proof in case it somehow disappeared by morning. Adrenaline overrode exhaustion. For the first time since the restaurant, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, against all odds, I had rights here. Maybe the truth was far bigger than my parents' threats. Still, uncertainty gnawed at me. What if the papers were outdated, or didn't mean what I thought they did? Legalese had always intimidated me, and I knew better than to trust old documents without a lawyer's opinion. Nonetheless, I knew what I had to do next. I'd call Ellen Sharp, my attorney friend, in the morning. I'd lay everything out for her. Every paper, every note from Nana and Pop, every tax bill. Whatever games my parents were playing, I was ready to fight back with facts. Leaving the attic, I paused for a moment on the landing, looking down at the sleeping house. My home, or was it? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I had a new, fierce resolve. Whatever my parents thought, I wasn't leaving without understanding the true story of who this house belonged to. And as I crawled back into bed, clutching my phone, the secrets of the attic glowed on my camera roll. A silent promise that I would get to the bottom of all of this before I packed a single box. Truths uncovered. Dawn seeped slowly through the bedroom blinds, casting faint stripes of sunlight on the papers that littered my nightstand. The property deed, tax notices, bank statements, utility bills, my phone with blown-up photos of Nana's note. I hadn't slept, not really. The tangled mixture of shock, anger, and a new, razor-edged determination had kept me wide awake, heart pounding, and mind racing. My first call at sunrise was to Ellen Sharp. She was a brisk and no-nonsense attorney I had met at a networking brunch the year before. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with early morning energy. "Madison, you okay?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, shaky but clear. "Ellen, I just found something huge about the house. Old property records, my name, my grandparents' will. I think my parents have lied to me for years. Can I show you everything this morning?" "I have a slot at 10, she replied. "Bring everything. We'll sort it out." I hung up, chest tight with anxiety and hope. After a shower that did little to wash away my stress, I gathered every scrap of evidence, sliding them into an overstuffed canvas tote. By 9:30, I was on my way to Ellen's office in Hillcrest, every red light and traffic delay making the weight of what I was about to do feel heavier. Ellen's office was small but efficient, paperwork stacked in neat piles, business degrees framed on the wall. She wasted no time. "Okay, Madison, walk me through everything from the start." I told her everything. The dinner, the house demands, the attic discovery, and the sense of betrayal that colored every memory now. She listened intently, never interrupting, her legal pad already half filled by the time I slid the most important folders to her across the table. She methodically read through each document, lips pursed in concentration. "This," she said, tapping the faded note from my grandmother, "is not just sentiment. It's intent. And this deed is still in your grandparents' names. The trust documentation is key here." She paused, scanning the tax returns and utility records. "These are all addressed to you, paid by you. That's significant, especially if your parents were claiming you were a guest, rather than an owner. My head spun as she pieced the legal puzzle together, fear nagging at the back of my mind. So what now? What do I look for? How bad could this get? Ellen adjusted her glasses. First, we pull the official records from the assessor's office. See if your parents ever legally transferred anything, or if they've just been squatting as estate executors. And I want to check your finances for any surprises. Sometimes in cases like this, we find loans or liens put in the heir's name. Loans? My gut clenched. Ellen nodded. Happens more than you'd think. Let's order a credit report for you right now. She typed quickly and soon frowned at the screen. There's a recent loan, $3,000, opened last year in your name, listing this address. Blood drained from my face. I never took out a loan. My dad did this, didn't he? Her voice was calm, but her eyes flashed with anger on my behalf. Almost certainly, he used your social security number, identity theft. Let me dig deeper. As Ellen continued her search, my hands trembled. My mind reeled at the scope of betrayal. It wasn't just the house. My own father had been digging into my credit, racking up debts that could destroy my future. Had Mom known, too? What sort of parents do this to their child? Ellen gave clear instructions. Immediately call your bank, Madison. Freeze your credit. Place alerts for fraud. I'll file a police report for identity theft on your behalf. And don't tell your parents what you found. Not yet. Let's get everything bulletproof first. I spent the next hour locked in her private conference room, making frantic calls. First to the credit bureaus, then my main bank, then a credit union, where I'd once opened a long-forgotten account. My voice shook, but my resolve hardened with every step. Several times, the customer service reps offered polite, practiced sympathy. But I could hear the undertones, disbelief, pity, a faint curiosity about how a family could become this fractured. When I finally broke for air and coffee, Ellen had started building out legal timelines, highlighting every suspicious transaction on my bank printouts. This is a perfect storm, she said, eyes not leaving her laptop. Your parents, especially your dad, have been misusing your name and money for at least a year. This qualifies as both civil fraud and criminal identity theft. And there's more. There's evidence he tried to add his name to the property via forged paperwork, but county records show only your grandparents and you by inheritance. If he tries to sell or mortgage the property, that's outright fraud. A numbness crept over me, slowly replaced by cold, deliberate anger. They tried to take everything. My home, my future. They would have let me keep paying for their lies. Forever, wouldn't they? Ellen nodded, her face full of compassion. I've seen it before, but your documentation, the trust, the will, the utility records, all of it gives you a strong case. We need to file an immediate motion with the court to prevent any transfer or sale. I'll draft it today. It felt surreal, listening to my attorney talk about restraining orders and theft in the context of my own parents. My phone buzzed as Ellen printed the first court documents, texts from Mom and Dad, alternating between guilt-tripping, anger, and outright demands. Ellen glanced at the screen. Don't respond. Document everything. We might need it as evidence of their intentions, or to refute any claims they make against you. Forward me screenshots. I nodded and forwarded every text and email, the digital record of manipulation and threats. The contrast between their words and the truths I was uncovering was jarring. On one hand, pleas and accusations. On the other, mounting evidence of betrayal. By noon, Ellen had initiated formal proceedings, fraud alerts, legal filings, motions to freeze the property. We organized every document, each one a piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Before I left, Ellen offered a final warning. There's one more thing you need to do. Change every lock in the house today. Don't give them a chance to come in while this is pending. If you see them attempt entry or try to intimidate you, call the police. I left her office with a heavy but newly determined heart. My first stop was a locksmith. My second, a hardware store for a door camera. As I installed fresh deadbolts that afternoon, hands shaking but purposeful, I realized that the home I'd poured so much into was truly under siege. That night, exhausted but unable to sleep, I sat with every scrap of paperwork spread on my kitchen table. I traced my name across each document, the signature of a woman forced to fight for what should have always been hers. The truth, once hidden, was now glaring. I had never truly been a tenant in my own home. My parents had lied, stolen, and forged their way into a corner. And now, thanks to old boxes in an attic and the stubborn love of grandparents I missed every day, I was ready to fight for justice, my home, my name, my future. And I would not let them steal a single day more. Family or foe, 48 hours. That's all the time Dad had given me. And as the deadline approached, I felt the pressure mounting with every minute. I had changed every lock on the doors, hidden the attic evidence in a safe place, and put fraud alerts on every account I owned. Still, I moved through the house with a strange mix of vigilance and heartbreak, knowing my parents, people I'd once trusted above all, were arrayed against me. Sure enough, the storm arrived right on schedule. It started mid-morning on a blustery Saturday. I'd barely finished my second cup of coffee when I heard impatient banging on the front door. Through the peephole, I saw both my parents standing on the porch, bundled in jackets, each looking more determined than the last. My father's face was set in that rigid mask of his, lips pressed so thin they were nearly invisible. Mom just looked tired, anger and sadness mingling in her eyes. I didn't open the door, not after everything I'd learned, not after the loans, the forged documents, the calculated betrayals. I spoke into the intercom, trying to keep my voice steady. If you need to reach me, send it through our lawyer. Dad's reply was a low growl. Madison, don't play these games. Open this door. For several minutes, they tried their old keys, rattling the handle, attempting every lock on every door, even testing the garage. I watched through the newly installed security camera, their frustration growing with every failed attempt. After a while, Mom slumped down onto the porch bench, burying her face in her hands. Dad, on the other hand, turned toward the camera, shouting, "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." Eventually, they stalked off, but their absence didn't bring peace. Within hours, my phone began to buzz, first with a cold, terse text from Dad. "Give us the house. We need it to fix our finances." And then with a long, guilt-laced email from Mom. She pleaded with me to think of the family and claimed I was tearing us apart for no good reason. Her words twisted around my heart, but behind every syllable, I heard the sharp ring of desperation and manipulation. It didn't stop there. That evening, my phone lit up with a notification from X, the social platform my younger sister Whitney preferred over all others. Within an hour, comments poured in. "Shame on you," one acquaintance from school wrote. "How could you do that to your parents?" Others chimed in, some confused, some cruel, some just nosy. A neighbor from 2 doors down asked publicly, "Is this why your folks looked so upset yesterday?" The sting of betrayal barely compared to the humiliation. I could have lashed out, responded with receipts and evidence, posted photos of the will and title deed. I could have exposed the silent years, the ignored phone calls from my aunt, The sudden appearance of bank loans I never took, that had torn every illusion apart. But I held my tongue. Whitney wanted a spectacle. I would not offer her one. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, brewed another coffee, and sat with the ache in my gut. That's when Renee showed up, the only friend from high school who still stopped by, the kind of friend who let herself in with a knock, who knew when I needed company, even when I didn't say a word. I wanted to tell Renee everything about the documents, the loans in my name, the stacks of proof hidden upstairs. But instead, I shrugged, forcing a smile. It's complicated. They're not exactly in a good place right now. Renee pulled out a chair, setting both our cups on the table. You know, family's worth fighting for. Are you sure there isn't a way to work this out? The question stung. I stared into the swirl of my coffee, recalling every late-night breakdown, every dollar spent on repairs, every time I'd put my parents' comfort before my own stability. They don't want compromise. They want to win, and I'm tired of losing. Renee nodded, reaching for my hand. You're strong, Maddie. I know you are. Just don't let this destroy you, okay? After she left, I locked the door twice. The house felt different, a fortress, not a home. I could still see the shadow of my childhood in the corners, but now every room pulsed with anxiety, every window a possible intrusion. I checked the security app again and again, watched my parents' frustrated faces in the clouded porch footage on endless loop. The attacks continued. Dad's texts shifted from demands to threats. Mom's emails grew more desperate. And then there were the calls from unknown numbers, hang-ups, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of Renee's visits. I turned the ringer silent, blocking every number in turn, each one a fresh reminder that the line between family and foe had blurred irreparably. In the neighborhood, whispers began. When I walked my dog, some neighbors waved, cautious and sympathetic. Others looked away. Mrs. Lee from across the street brought over banana bread. Just in case you need something warm, she said. Others avoided conversation completely, not wanting to pick a side. Online, Whitney's post exploded, turning from a family squabble to a cautionary tale. People who didn't know the half of it judged me, offered armchair advice, or condemned me outright. But a handful of private messages from distant cousins, old classmates, even Whitney's ex-boyfriend, came quietly supportive. Don't let them trample your rights, Madison. You deserve better, said one. One night, unable to sleep, I sat in the living room, the old lockbox in my lap, and wrote a list. Secure the documents, follow Ellen's legal advice, block toxic messages, never respond in anger. I stuck it to the fridge, beside a new note in bold, hopeful marker. Stand firm, because that's what it came down to in the end. Whether my family was blood or foe, I could no longer make myself small for them, could not carry the burden of their mistakes and shame. I wasn't the naive daughter anymore, the helpful big sister who always patched things up. I was the owner of my life, and I would defend it. Their betrayal was deep, personal, and it turned out entirely public. But so was my resilience. I walked through each room, alone but unbowed, and made a promise out loud, a promise that echoed under my new locks, over every ugly comment and every manipulative plea. And in that instant, facing the shattered reflection of what family meant, I finally began to feel free, a confession from a distant relative. A week had crept by since my parents' ultimatum and the social media onslaught. Each day, the weight of isolation grew heavier. I avoided neighbors' glances, let most calls go to voicemail, and told myself that if I just pushed through, the facts would protect me. but even facts I was learning could feel lonely. The first rays of clarity came on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray, drizzly San Diego day that left the house echoey and unsettled. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar area code, 206, Seattle. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, expecting another scam call, or worse, my parents trying from a burner number. Something in me said answer. Hello, I said, voice tight. A pause. Then a quivering but familiar voice. Madison, honey, it's Aunt Janet. I hope this is still your number. Aunt Janet. My mom's older sister, the one I hadn't spoken to in at least 7 years. I remembered her as a straight shooter, never one for drama or sleight of hand. A rare quality in my mom's family. Memories of family reunions by Lake Washington flickered in. Janet with her big laugh, her blunt advice, the little gifts she'd bring each niece and nephew. For a moment, my throat seized. Hi, Aunt Janet, is everything all right? She sighed, breath shaky through the receiver. Madison, I heard about what's happening. Whitney called me, practically begging for help. She said you're locking your parents out, refusing to help them. But I didn't call to guilt you. I'm calling because you deserve the truth. There was a tremor in her voice as she continued. The house, that house in San Diego, it was never supposed to be your parents'. It was always meant for you. Your grandparents made sure of it. When they passed, I saw the will with my own eyes. The room seemed to tip, the floor shifting beneath me. You saw the will? I managed. Yes. Janet's tone was heavy, measured. Your mother and I had a huge fight about it years ago. I tried to reach out. She shut me out, said I should stay out of their business. After that, I gave up trying to squeeze back into the family drama. But your grandparents loved you, Madison. They left that house to you. It was written right there, clear as day. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, hungry for every detail. Janet, please, are you sure? Mom and Dad always said they were just letting me stay, doing me a favor. They never once said a word about the will. I'm sure, she answered firmly. The document named you as the sole heir to the San Diego house. Your parents were only supposed to manage the estate until you turned 25, then transfer the title. When I kept pushing to make sure it happened, your mother stopped returning my calls. I thought of the faded note I'd found in the attic, my grandmother's careful script. To Madison, upon our passing, with love, Nana and Pop. It all started to click. The hidden papers, the secrecy, their abrupt urgency to get me out. Janet's voice lowered. Madison, I don't know what your parents have told you, but I've always felt guilty for letting it drop. I should have pushed harder. I should have told you sooner. I can't undo what's happened, but I want to help now. Do you still have their will or anything with their lawyer's name? I do. I found old property records and the will in the attic. My words spilled out. Document after document, the years of tax records, my name on every bill. I have everything. My lawyer is on it. She's pulling the official filings from the county office. Janet made a relieved sound. Good. Get those records certified. The will is your protection. She hesitated. And Madison, I know you're hurting. None of this is your fault. I don't care what your parents say. A long silence hung between us, filled only by static and the faint, distant clatter of Janet's kitchen. I blinked away tears I didn't notice forming. Thank you, Janet. I needed to hear this, even if it makes me angrier at them than ever. You're allowed to feel however you feel, she replied. And if you need anything, a statement, someone to back your story, or just an ear, I'm here. You're not alone in this, I promise. After we hung up, I pressed my forehead to the cold kitchen window, watching clouded sunlight struggle through the rain. For the first time since all of this had started, evidence wasn't just paperwork and faded signatures. It was real, spoken aloud by someone outside my closed circle. As afternoon bled into evening, scraps of conversation with Janet replayed in my head. My phone pinged again. This time, a message from Ellen, my attorney. Relief pulsed through me, mixing with betrayal, grief, and a hot sense of vindication. The years I'd spent believing I was just borrowing a roof from my parents, the emotional balance sheet weighed down by gratitude and guilt, suddenly upended. It was never theirs to give me. It was always mine, and they'd hidden the truth purely for their own advantage. Late that night, I sat at my desk, Janet's words and Ellen's email spread out before me. I drafted a letter just for myself, a kind of inventory of truth and feeling. I wrote, I am not a visitor in my own home. I have a right to be here. My parents' lies do not define me. I see their cruelty, but I am not powerless with the truth on my side. I tucked the letter into my notebook, next to copies of the will and property records. I sent Janet a text, too. As I crawled into bed, exhaustion wrapping around me like a lead blanket, I felt something that might have been hope. The road ahead was ugly, but for the first time since the family dinner, where everything fell apart, I truly wasn't alone. Not legally, not emotionally. Truth has a weight all its own. For the first time in weeks, it was lifting me up instead of pressing me down. Thank you for everything. I'll let you know how the lawyer says to proceed. Maybe one day this family can heal. But for now, I'm fighting back. The legal battle and justice's smile. The process of taking my own parents to court was a nightmare I'd never imagined for myself. In the quiet hours before dawn, doubts assaulted me. Was this really happening? Was I justified, even with mountains of evidence? But then the facts, the forged loan, the misappropriated deed, years of deception would resurface, setting my resolve like cement. Ellen, my attorney, moved swiftly. She filed injunctions to prevent any transfer or sale of the property. Fraud alerts were in place on every account. She drafted legal complaints for both civil fraud and criminal identity theft. Each document another brick fortifying my shaky sense of safety. Preparation for court took weeks. The hardest part wasn't combing through paperwork. Those stacks of it covered my dining table for days. It was seeing my parents' names on the defendant line. For so long, I'd been the daughter trying to keep peace, tamping down her needs for the sake of family. Now, I was forced to see them as adversaries. Court dates arrived. I wore a charcoal blazer that made me feel like somebody's idea of a lawyer, not just a hurt daughter. My insides twisted every time I saw Mom and Dad across the hallway, sometimes huddled with their own attorney, sometimes pointedly avoiding my line of sight. They looked older than I remembered. Mom with new streaks of gray, Dad's bravado deflated into cold calculation. The first hearing focused on who owned the house. Ellen presented the faded will, the trust documents, decades of utility bills and tax statements addressed to me. She clicked through a gallery of photos I'd taken. The attic lockbox, my grandmother's handwritten note, legal correspondence never meant to be hidden. My father's lawyer argued that my parents had managed the property for years, that I was an ungrateful tenant, living at their mercy. I bit back the urge to shout the truth. Instead, Ellen dismantled their narrative, methodically producing payment records for repairs, documents in my name, and, finally, a certified copy of the will from the county clerk. It was unambiguous. The house was never theirs. It was always mine, held in trust until I was old enough to claim it. My father took the stand, voice clipped and defensive. We allowed Madison to stay after her divorce. We footed expenses. Mom wouldn't meet my eye as she testified. Her voice quavered when asked about the loan application in my name. She stammered about family needs and doing what was necessary for everyone to survive. During a tense lunch recess, my hands shook so badly I spilled coffee on my files. Renee, who insisted on waiting with me outside the courtroom, squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing. They put you here, not the other way around." The momentum built slowly, but inevitably, over days of testimony. Janet, my aunt, flew down from Seattle to testify. Calm and clear, she confirmed seeing my grandparents' will and explained the feud that had ripped her from my mother's life. "Madison was always named the sole heir," she said steadily. "Her parents were only supposed to manage the property until she was of age. They never told her, nor anyone, about the terms." On the fourth day, Ellen completed her case with a timeline mapping every act of deception. The trust's creation, my grandfather's death, the years of paid bills and ignored correspondence, the forged loan, the eviction threat masked as a family intervention. As my parents' defense faltered, they grew more agitated. Dad glared across the aisle. Mom wept silently behind stacks of tissue. I felt a strange sense of grief for the parents I had wished for, but never truly had. The verdict came one sunlit afternoon, with the courthouse windows gleaming and the air in the courtroom taut as wire. The judge reviewed every submitted document, then pronounced. For a moment, the world felt muted by a thick, underwater silence. Ellen squeezed my shoulder. Renee was openly weeping in the back row.
Oh, yeah.
I stood, numb and almost disbelieving, my legs shaky but unbroken. Dad stormed out, jaw clenched, avoiding my gaze entirely. Mom lingered, looking a decade older, her hands fluttering helplessly. Outside the courthouse, Janet pulled me in for a hug. I cried for what seemed like hours, not just from relief, but from the years of gaslighting, the loss of an imagined family, the exhaustion of fighting so hard for something that should have always been mine. The aftermath was quieter and, in its way, more sobering than I'd pictured. My parents withdrew completely, their contact reduced to a blunt email about where to mail their remaining belongings. Whitney sent one scathing message, then blocked my number. The silence was thick, but somehow cleaner than the chaos that had preceded it. Within 2 weeks, the county recorded the house fully in my name. A check for the fraud damages showed up in my mailbox. No note, only a signature I half recognized. Ellen and I celebrated with quiet relief, raising to go cups of sparkling cider in her office, surrounded by file boxes that no longer felt like anchors, but like relics of a storm survived. I spent nights in the living room, among the boxes and new locks, processing what it meant to own something at last. On paper in truth, and in heart, I had visions, some bitter, some bright, of repainting the bedroom, of one day inviting friends over for laughter that didn't carry the echo of threat or accusation. The house felt lighter, the ghosts of betrayal replaced slowly by the feeling of justice, of something earned through pain and perseverance. Justice had not come easily, and it did not come quietly, but when it did, it felt like sunlight through storm clouds, startling, warming, and undeniable. The legal battle had not just restored my inheritance. It gave me back my sense of self, my faith in truth, and an unshakable resolve to shape my life on my terms from here forward. A new beginning, true freedom. The victory in court brought the kind of relief that felt, at first, like shock, heavy, quiet and almost intimidating in its vastness. For days after the verdict, I moved through my house, the house I could finally, undeniably, call mine. In a daze, it was as if I were treading water in an unfamiliar ocean, aware that the worst of the storm had passed, but uncertain just what to do with all the horizon that now stretched before me. The silence, once a harbinger of dread, began to change its texture. With my parents utterly withdrawn, Whitney vanished from my life, and even most of the neighborhood drama fading away. I had space to examine every corner of my existence, to truly take inventory, not just of what had happened, but of who I could become. Cleaning up became a ritual, almost a meditation. I went from room to room, packing away the reminders of old hurts. My mom's sewing machine, dusty in a closet corner, Dad's stack of golfing magazines, the deep burgundy curtains my parents had insisted on keeping, even after the fabric faded unevenly in the sun. Still, not everything was easy to box up. Each item told its own story, not all bitter. In the attic, I found more than just documents and records. I found a childhood clay ornament with my name, a graduation card from Nana, brittle but lovingly preserved. For the first time, I felt capable of remembering the love that shaped me, separate from the betrayal that had followed. It didn't take long to realize, though, that my connection to the house had changed irreversibly. The rooms were full of hard-won solace, but shadows clung to corners like dust. I thought of everything the lawsuit had dredged up, the insults, the loneliness, the risk of losing everything. Even when justice landed on my side, the victory felt double-edged. I dreamed, at night, of the front door slamming, of footsteps on the stairs that weren't mine. I woke up sweating, the edges of memory too sharp against my skin. Little by little, a new idea took root. Maybe freedom wasn't about clinging to victory or defending a fortress that bore too many scars. Maybe it was about letting go, about building something new, uncolored by old grief. The more I let myself imagine life elsewhere, a sunlit kitchen without echoes, a bedroom where I made the rules, the lighter I felt. The decision seemed almost obvious in retrospect. I would sell the house. The first step was the hardest, calling the realtor whose sign I'd passed on walks for years. Her name was Maureen, and her voice was as warm as freshly baked bread. I've watched that house for decades, she said thoughtfully. It's got beautiful bones, Madison. Let's help it become a home for someone new. For once, I didn't flinch at letting go. I wanted someone else's laughter in these rooms, someone else's dreams rising with the morning sunlight. Preparing for the sale, I poured my energy into renovations. I painted over the nicks and dents, chose beachy colors, soft blues, warm creams, and replaced the curtains with sheer linen panels that let every bit of daylight spill in. I filled vases with fresh flowers and scrubbed garden beds until my hands ached. The work was taxing, but the effort felt different from all those years spent maintaining the house out of fear. This time, I did it out of hope. Within weeks, the sign went up. The first open house brought families, retirees, newlyweds with starry eyes. I watched people drift through the rooms, imagining futures I no longer claimed as my own. The house sold fast, almost unbelievably so. And when the final papers were signed, I felt a curious blend of joy, nerves, and deep physical release. The wire transfer landed, a sum large enough, for the first time in my adult life, to let me exhale. I found a sleek, sun-washed apartment near Pacific Beach. It wasn't large or fancy, but as I unlocked the door for the first time, arms full of groceries instead of regrets, I knew I'd chosen well. The ocean smelled clean and sharp, outside my balcony. Each night brought the roll and hush of distant surf. Each morning, an expanse of sky, impossible to fill up with worry. My new space came together bit by bit. With every box unpacked, I felt the pieces of my identity click into place. I painted, decorated, hung up favorite artwork, rescued from boxes marked someday. I bought a new set of plates, turquoise and white, and let myself use the nice towels on an ordinary weeknight. Friends came over for dinner and wine on the balcony. Renee brought me a houseplant. So this place knows it's loved from day one. I hung a photo of Nana and Pop above my bed, not as an anchor to the past, but as a quiet thank you for the strength I'd finally found in myself. Time, at last, began to heal what had been torn open. The online drama fizzled. Even Whitney's harshest words faded into irrelevance. A few neighbors who'd once muttered behind their curtains now waved in the parking lot or sent a quick text. "You deserve peace. Wishing you the best." Janet called now and then. Each conversation feeling less like a lifeline, more like a genuine thread in a new family tapestry. Most importantly, I learned how to trust myself again. I set up regular appointments with a therapist, not just to process the legal trauma, but to unlearn the habits of self-blame and fear that had taken root. I made lists, short ones at first, of what freedom meant to me. Saying no when I needed to. Enjoying silence rather than fearing it. Being generous, but never at the cost of my own boundaries. I put up a sticky note beside my fridge in bold capital letters. Forever strong. Sometimes, when old doubts crept in, I'd run a hand over those words and breathe them in like a promise. The milestones were small. Cooking my favorite meal, walking barefoot to the shore, waking up without a sense of dread. But each one marked an inch of ground reclaimed. I learned to forgive myself for not fixing my family, for needing to be free, for craving a life that was truly mine. Some nights, I'd walk along the beach at sunset, salt tang in the air and wind in my hair, and feel so new, so unburdened, that I'd laugh for no reason at all. What had once been a battleground, both literal and emotional, transformed entirely. My home was now a place built on choice, not inheritance. No longer was I defined by bloodlines or guilt or what I had sacrificed for others. I belonged to myself. Through the window at dusk, I sometimes glimpsed the city glowing, the ocean reflecting back a kind of freedom I never knew possible. This proved to be the greatest victory, not merely having won justice, but having claimed a peaceful, hopeful beginning. Here, at last, was where I could rest, rebuild, and dream. And in this new home, by the sea, with justice behind me, and possibility on every breeze, I knew I would never again let anyone take away what I deserved, not even those who shared my name.